because Dr. Epps is gone, but just as I've seen this process work, it's usually a little later, and a little more time before when we introduce it and then we examine it with the public. But what I've seen is that we usually adopt it, we send it in, and then we get it back in about a month, and during that period of time, it's always been my understanding that the questions that we raised from tonight or last week, that we then dealt with the administration, and that a lot of the stuff we see actually in the proposed budget is not what actually comes to pass. And to that question, I would say, Flavio, I think you're probably more aware of it. Even though I strenuously stood on my head last year and screamed about the 311 layoffs, which were primarily, there were a great number of teachers, special ed, my passion, and also in custodian and secretarial. Isn't it the fact that many of that did not come to pass because we found funding? Once we got through the budget process, we found federal funding, we found funding that became available because of layoffs, because of retirements, and that indeed, although I screamed and yelled that it was draconian and stood on my head about it, wasn't it like not as bad as I thought, because you then took the board very seriously and tried to make the cuts and the everything work out? Could you comment on that since Dr. Epps is not here?
Yes, and while he's coming, I will remind you that we're voting on a number, and the numbers, the line items, can always be transferred. As Ms. Lester has pointed out many times at our finance meeting, transfers happen all the time. So that if 40 teachers somehow retire, that changes the number, the dynamic. So it's an evolving thing, it's an evolving document. Mr. Rebecca, please.
And thank you for that clarification. I was trying to say for the public hasn't been here before, that even though there may be a list attached that says, you know, we may propose certain cuts, that in actuality, the board goes on the record that they don't want that to happen, and the administration in the past has tried to not have that happen. Has that been the case?
The scenario, as you just described it, Ms. Mack, is correct. If it is passed and voted on tonight, then again, we will sit down with the board members to make modifications and adjustments. And we always, as you know from the past, we've always taken your recommendation from board members seriously. So that's correct. We will. Dr. Epps has always entertained and has been very open to your suggestions and recommendations. That's correct.
And not just mine, but is it
not just yours,
is it possible, and again, with deference to my new board members, they were not here when this process occurred last year. They came, the board reorg was after this budget was adopted. So there is this, I'm going back to the issue that I believe it is critical that new board members feel comfortable with the process, and therefore, if I do move to table in order to make them feel more comfortable, it is because I feel that this is their first time. They bring up very good points, and we all, you know, we all have been there, and it may be easy for me to say that looking at a $700 million budget, I know that we'll be able to work it out, but maybe for members who have not been through this before, they may not have that experience of the process. So I'll say that, but I do have, thank you, I do have one, I have one or 2 points, and I'll try not to make them 7 or 8, but I'm not happy with the special ed issues, surprise. I know that there are cuts here of about 80 teachers in special ed. There's also, which made no sense to me, the Project RAISE, which is a reading program that supports special ed. There's transition specialists. We cut that program last year. Well, this year we took out the one remaining transition specialist that we left for the Win Access program at McNair, which is our shared time program. And I don't know where anybody in their right mind thinks that those kids are going to be able to move on to transition without a transition specialist. But, you know, that's something else. Other issues, not happy with any of the cuts, of course. We want to maximize this is a family, and we want everybody employed, for one thing. But we don't want people, and I think going back to what Sterling said, we really got to get to a zero-based budget. I always tell you I know nothing about the budget. I know about facilities, I know about special ed, I may know something about early childhood because Pat taught me over the years, but you gotta go to zero-based budget. I mean, I sit on New Jersey Transit's advisory board, I know they do that, you know, and you can't do it in a week or two. I think what Sterling just said about starting in May of this year, you really probably could do it if you started then, and I'm sure that our administration does that. It's just that the board members are not in it, and we might have some suggestions, such as, I went over this budget a little bit with Melissa Simmons in a different venue that, and I'm not quoting exact numbers, but I do know, and what the public doesn't understand, and maybe we started to do it, and Mr. DeRosa certainly brought the point up, this isn't our budget. This is the state of New Jersey's budget. They give us the funding. So they give us the numbers, they give us the funding. First of all, we do not set the tax levy. I am a homeowner. I just went to my account today. You don't even want to know what I'm going to have to pay this year, or where I'm going to get it. But the issue is, we all are hardworking people that have to pay taxes. Now, I pay my taxes to Jersey City, and I pay my federal and my state income tax, and then they come back and they determine what our budget is by telling us how much money we can spend. We do not have any control over the tax levy. That has gone up since we came back to local control. First it was John Corzine, and now it is Governor Christie setting the tax levy. And I said this last year ad nauseum. Unless the budget for the school district goes down under $104 million, we can't impact the local tax levy. And since it's $630 million, we're not going to get there this year. So we cannot do anything. I actually found it was a modest increase considering what we went through last year, which I think was 8 to 12. In the past couple of years, it's been 8 to 12%. And I sit on New Jersey Transit, we raise fares 25%, so I realized how this is hurting us. But we cannot, nothing we do here tonight will change the tax levy. We're paying a proportion of our school budget. But there are a number of other things that we can do. And one thing, and I want to say it again, there's about $25 million in this budget, which is coincidentally about the deficit, between 20 and 25 million, that we would not have to put into this budget if the state would fulfill its obligation from the School Development Authority for capital projects for facilities. The state took away our capital program in the year 2000 under the beginning of the school construction program. They started it, they stopped it, they reorged, they turned it upside down, they turned it from the New Jersey EDA to school construction, and then that went kind of bluey, and then they redid it as the School Development Authority. And there are projects that were approved as emergent projects, which I think emergent means emergency, you know, when you go into the thesaurus, for A. Harry Moore and Snyder and Dickinson. And guess what? The state said they were emergent projects 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but they haven't funded them. So guess what happens then? In order to keep the school system open, we have to take the money out of our operating budget, which is supposed to pay for our classroom teachers, our books, our lunches, our security guards, and we have to put it into buildings, brick and mortar, because the state is failing to provide the funding that they're supposed to give us. I bring that up because I think one of the things that's the problem with this budget is that we sit and we hear about it and we talk about it among ourselves, but I don't think anybody understands that the problems, there are several problems, but the problems are from the top, and then the problems are from within and then under us. So let's go back to say that we need to be properly funded for state programs that are supposed to be funded in this district, and we're not. And I would like to turn around and say to Paula Hack and to Ramon Rivera and to Mr. Sapira, who is our outside counsel, I don't want to sue the state of New Jersey. I don't want to sue the governor. I understand it's a tough economy, but we need to be able to fund our school system in a responsible way, and without funding, when we're putting $25 million into capital construction for facilities, which is supposed to be paid for the state, we have a problem. So that's one issue. The second issue, more locally, and I already spoke on special ed, I do not believe that cutting 80 teachers from special ed this year, after cutting 80 teachers from special ed last year, although I think we got most of them back last year because we had the ARA grants, if you have kids that are supposed to, they're saying, well, they're going to increase the class size. Now, to some degree, that may be true. In some instances, you may have a kid at number 6 school, a special ed class. You may only have 2 or 3 kids in a class, or 6 or 8 or 10. But just to say that we're going to collapse classes and so that we can have more special ed classes, it just doesn't sound right to me. And I'm hoping, I'm hoping the special ed department I'm hoping they were, I'm hoping that they weren't just good soldiers and went along with the plan, because I know that they're very responsible people, but I know people put constraints on these budgets. My third issue may be more whacked out, but it's an example. I have been asking what the budgets for the high schools are, and I know what Dickinson and Lincoln and Snyder's are, but I've been asking about Liberty, and I know about McNair a little bit. I've been asking about Liberty and Infinity. Infinity used to be a charter school, and it's not a charter school anymore. Last year, unfortunately, Create Charter School lost their charter, and Dr. Epps was asked to kind of come up with a program to help out there. But it's not that program. Those students went back to their home schools. And kind of at the end of the year, it's another state issue. In March of last year, the county superintendent decided to close Create Charter School, which had a charter for about 400 high school students and also students in the 7th and 8th grade. And the 7th and 8th grade were at the Boys and Girls Club. Never a good idea. The Boys and Girls Club wasn't good for them, and I don't think it was good for the students. I like children being together in a building. And I understand the philosophy of the charter school was going to be they were going to have a feeder school. And they tried to have in their Assumptions All Saints, and that didn't work out, so they put it at the Boys and Girls Club. So, and having a high school charter school, to me, back in the day, didn't even sound that bad, because our own high schools are so overcrowded in some instances that when that high school was first proposed, even though I wasn't too in favor of it, I said, let's see how it works out. And to some degree, it did work out. But for whatever reason, last year, the state came in and it closed it. Now, we used the building, entered into a $450,000 lease for 10 years, which is $4.5 million. You've all heard my comments on that one, since I was on the facilities committee. But we then moved children into the school, and I thought, and I must have missed it, but I thought that we were creating a program there, and we are creating a program there. But last year, we had 69 to 79 students there, and not all of those students were in the 9th grade. I guess we had the 7th and 8th grade, so I haven't even asked the number of how many students were in the actual 9th grade. I do know that for next year, we're going to take 100 more kids, and now it's going to have 179 students. Well, we're going to have 179 students in a facility we rent. We rent nothing else. We lease no facilities. We don't lease anything anymore. That was a decision of the board last year, and we pulled the plug on all leases. We're going to continue this lease for $450,000, and I asked Melissa, who is always very responsive, for the budget for that, and she gave me the budget for next year. It's going to be $2.2 million for 179 kids. I asked what Liberty's budget is, and Liberty's budget, which is a full-scale high school, is $3 million. I then found out, again, by asking questions, just as Carol